The remains of the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani, who died in a US drone strike in Baghdad on Friday, have been returned to his home country, Iran. Tens of thousands of mourners crowded the streets, first of all in the city of Ahvaz, as the vehicle carrying his body made its way through the streets. Amid the grief, there were chants of death to America. General Soleimani was the architect of Iran's military activities across the Middle East, and his de facto influence meant that in reality, only the supreme leader of his country, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, outranked him. Well, the cortege is continuing to make its way across Iran. Currently, it's in the city of Mashhad before the funeral to be held on Tuesday. The assassination marked a significant escalation between Iran and the United States. Tehran's leadership has threatened what it calls severe revenge. President Trump, who authorized the attack, has also warned against any retaliation. Lina Sinjab reports from Beirut.
A sea of mourners across Iran. Thousands are out to bid farewell to a man respected by many at home and feared abroad. Major General Qasem Soleimani's body arrived in Iran early on Sunday morning. 3 days of mourning begins here in Ahvaz before moving to Tehran on Monday, and then the burial in his hometown in Kerman. This is a moment of mobilizing loyalty among Shia communities in the region. Iran vowed to take revenge for the loss of its top commander, a man who shaped the country's presence and influence in the region by force and blood. Iran's response could come at a time and place of its choosing to hit American interests in the region or beyond. Some of its proxy militias in Iraq started reacting. 2 rockets hit American bases in the heavily fortified Green Zone in Baghdad, where anti-ISIS coalition is based. No casualties reported, but that's a sign of warning for the nearly 6,000 American troops in Iraq. Perhaps it's time to leave. Instead, the US is planning to bolster its defenses in the region, sending 3,000 more troops. President Donald Trump warned in a tweet of harsh reaction to any attack on Americans or US assets. He says the US has targeted 52 Iranian sites to strike if any escalation. The world is calling on self-restraint. But the loss is big for Tehran, and the consequences could be severe for the US and adds tensions to an already complex region. Lina Sinjab, BBC News, Beirut.
The general's killing has had a wide effect across the region, which I'd like to look at in a little bit of detail now, because Iraq's parliament has just passed a resolution telling the government to end the presence of foreign troops in that country. The resolution itself is non-binding, but it asks the government to ensure that foreign troops do not use its land, air and waters for any reason. The resolution was passed in an extraordinary session of Parliament following the killing of General Qasem Soleimani. Lots to talk on this. I'm joined by Lise Doucette, our Chief International Affairs Correspondent, who's in Kabul, and Jane O'Brien in Washington. Lise, I'd like to start with you first. Let's start with that Iraqi Parliament vote calling on foreign forces to leave. How significant is that vote, and do you expect those forces to leave?
Well, US forces are in Iraq at, quote, the invitation of the Iraqi government. So if the Iraqi government withdraws that invitation, then it will be clear, and they have many means now to make it clear if they are welcome, that they will have to leave. So it's a 328-member parliament. 170 turned up today and voted 170 to 0. To expel American troops from the country. Now, significantly, those who showed up are from the country's Shia majority. Most of the parties who are linked to any of the Sunni Muslim groups or to the Kurds in particular have a long history of successful cooperations with the United States. They didn't even show up. So it's a question, it is another reminder, if one was needed, about the deep and dangerous divisions inside Iraq itself. And the killing of Qasem Soleimani has only made that even more dangerous a rift.
Right, things shifting around. Jane, I'd like to turn to you. America's got about 5,000 or so troops in Iraq at the moment. How will it see this vote in the Iraqi parliament?
Well, it depends who you ask. I think not many Americans who support Donald Trump will be sorry to see American troops pulling out of Iraq. a lot of people in America question what they're doing there in the first place. But the broader issue is that America will lose its influence within Iraq and its ability to act as a counterbalance to Iranian ambitions within Iraq. It could also jeopardize its operations elsewhere, make it very difficult to provide any effective measures to counter ISIS, Islamic State, or Daesh, as the American military refer to them. And in fact, just moments ago, we had a statement from the Pentagon saying that it was now suspending all its operations against Islamic State, not because of the killing of Soleimani, but because of sustained rocket attacks from an Iranian proxy over the last 2 months and the killing of an American contractor. The military is now going to be focused on protecting Iraqi personnel and its bases within Iraq, it says.
Right, that's an interesting statement from the Pentagon. I'd like you both just to stay there for the moment, because there's also been reaction to the killing of Qasem Soleimani from Lebanon, from one of Iran's main proxies. That's the Hezbollah party. The leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, had this to say.
US military bases, US military ships, every US officer and soldier in our nation and our region. The US Army is the one that killed these men, and it is the one that will pay the price.
Lise, I don't know if you were able to catch what Mr. Nasrallah was saying there. He's also said the killing of Qasem Soleimani marks the start of a new phase for the entire region. What do you make of his words?
Well, I think people have to take notice of what Hassan Nasrallah says, one of the closest militias to Iran. This is the first time he's spoken since the death of Qasem Soleimani. He's been on the run, basically, for more than a decade, fearing assassination by any of his enemies, including neighboring Israel or the United States. He has called this, as you heard, a clear and blatant crime, making it clear that nothing is off limits when it comes to the U.S. Not U.S. warships, not U.S. bases, not U.S. soldiers. In fact, he didn't limit himself to the U.S. He said, and to Iraq. He said we have to expel U.S. forces from the entire Middle East. And if he needed an echo, Qasem Soleimani's daughter today gave a brief interview to a Lebanese channel, and she said, "I am sure that Hezbollah will avenge the death of my father."
Well, let's just pick up with going back to the United States, because President Trump said yesterday that his country had around 52 targets, which included sites of cultural importance to Iran. Now, international law says it's illegal to target cultural sites and could be seen as a war crime. Speaking on US TV in the past hour, the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo clarified Washington's position.
The American people should know that every target that we strike will be a lawful target, and it will be a target designed at the singular mission of protecting and defending America. President Trump has been diligent about that. He doesn't want war. He's talked about this repeatedly. He is a reluctant participant in this, but he will never shy away from protecting America.
Right, so Mike Pompeo said that. President Trump had said that he was going to threaten cultural sites. Jane, what's the definitive word on what the United States might do?
Well, I think it depends on what Iran's going to do. I think that's the way it's being framed here. The ball is in the Iranian court, and people are just waiting to see what will happen next. What we're hearing at the moment is threats and counter threats, but the distinction between a cultural site and a site of importance to Iranian culture, I think, is going to be lost on most people, and particularly in Iran. So the wider issue is this very tense situation that people are very conscious of in America, whereby the war of words and the rhetoric, as is fairly common with this presidency, is not doing anything to reduce the tensions within the region or within America over the wisdom of this killing in the first place.
Jane O'Brien in Washington and Lise Doucette in Kabul. Thank you so much to both of you. Iran has announced it's planning to roll back further on the commitments it made in 2015 on its nuclear program to curb its nuclear ambitions. President Trump, of course, pulled out of the deal in 2018, and Iran has gradually been moving away from it since then. So let's take a look now at what one of America's key allies has to say. Britain is a signatory to that deal, and its Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, appeared on the BBC on Sunday morning. He called for a de-escalation of tensions whilst sympathising with the US position.
We understand the action they took, but we also need to be very clearly focused on what happens next. We want to de-escalate the tensions. We want to see a route through this crisis. We do not want to see a major war in the Middle East. The only group or players that would benefit from that would be the terrorists and Daesh. And whilst we totally understand and agree and share the need to contain the nefarious activities, not just of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, but Tehran more generally on the nuclear issue, on destabilising countries throughout the Middle East, the disruption of international shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, we also need to see that there's a route, a door left ajar for a diplomatic solution, so that when the leadership in Tehran wake up to their options, they understand that there is a positive route through for them if they're willing to live up to the basic responsibilities that come with being a responsible member of the international community.
The British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab.